Or house and mission.
All right, we got everybody. I have one more slot for a presentation tomorrow. Does anybody want to go tomorrow?
Thank you.
Nobody? All right. Did you want to go? All right, we'll take you. Sounds good.
Are we doing project number 2? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I already filled the slot, but it could be whatever. If you had it ready, you could. But we've already done it, so at this point, we don't have any room till next week. What day is today? Tomorrow's the 5th? Yeah. All right, today we've got Kinsey and Dylan, right?
Thanks, so yeah. Pretty sure I'm presenting.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm standing here trying to remember what you guys did.
I did something.
Yeah, and the other one was adoption concept. Okay.
Question?
Yeah.
Can I do like, say if I listen to a sermon, can I take that sermon and write about it? If it has to do with family and marriage?
Like create a review of a sermon?
Yes.
Okay, so if you like wrote all the points, talk about, things you hear versus use, you can do an evaluation, 3 to 4 page paper. I don't know, okay, that would work.
Thank you.
All right, the other thing I forgot to tell you about the test, which is next week, we'll release it on Wednesday to start, and we're gonna release it on Thursday, and then you have through Friday at 5 o'clock to do it.
What is it?
That will be the test next week. The one thing is I accept late work on papers, but you can't do the test late. All right, so you have to do it in that window of that time. So that's the only thing that I think I forgot to say. All right, so today we'll finish the premarital counseling, and then we're gonna go into the early years of marriage. All right, so you feel like you're learning stuff about this counseling thing?
Yes.
It seems like there's a lot of stuff, right, that you have to.
I have one question.
Yeah.
How in that dynamic in a relationship does the man feel like he can tell his wife things and be heard, but she doesn't feel like she can tell him things and be heard when he's more quiet and she's more loud?
Okay, so how do you deal with a situation like that?
Yeah, like how does that concept even out? Because in my brain,
You have to make a choice, I guess, so the person that's louder should probably try to draw out the quieter person. So giving them safe opportunities where they feel comfortable to talk.
also
Maybe asking more questions.
Okay.
And then the other person, say it's the guy, like in the case of this thing, they would need to be making more choices to aggressively say things when they haven't before. All right, so we looked at this. This was the couple map, so where people fall in on their own individual scheme of things. And we said that if you are somewhere in those white ranges, it's usually a pretty good place to be. All right, and then after that, we've got the family map. So this one is the family that you come from. And I told you guys we're gonna do this as a group, not today, but another day we're gonna do it as a group. And we're gonna like plot it out on the board to see where everybody's family fits, and it's pretty interesting. What I find actually is seeing that a lot of you came from Christian homes, a lot of the values that your parents have are probably pretty similar, and it does kind of come out in a very similar way. And then there are always those that are somewhere on some extreme, but in general it's fairly close. All right, so this one here we have Maria coming from a very connected, somewhat flexible family. So overly connected, the reason why it wouldn't be the greatest is that maybe they're not making room for people to make individual choices for themselves. All right, so they might be acting more as a group instead of allowing individuals there. Then the one on the bottom, Daniel, is on, that is on the less flexible end and somewhat connected, so more rule-based, maybe not very well emotionally connected. All right, personality scales. So the next thing, we've got social, so we've got a complete opposite here. We've got an introvert-extrovert sort of situation. We've got change, someone that soars low, and then high, and then organized. It flips over here to one being more organized than another. That is a huge thing for an adjustment when you get married. If you have somebody that's less organized than the other, oh man, it drives you nuts, right? I am a type of person that I like things neat, and every time my husband has something that he puts on a counter, it's like itching at me. Like, get that thing off. It still drives me nuts all the time. So people that maybe are more organized with certain things could have difficulty adjusting to a person that is maybe a bit less organized. All right, and then emotional steadiness, pretty equal, which is a nice thing. Pleasing, so Daniel scores higher there. Remember, he's the quiet one. He doesn't like to rock the boat, so he is more of a people pleaser. All right, so here you'd need to talk about introvert-extrovert issues, reacting to change. All right, what are some of the big major life change experiences that you go through in life that are very hard to adjust to?
Children.
Okay, puberty is a good one. All right, children, what else? Deaths, maybe moving, getting a new job, getting married in the first place. So what many people always advise is you don't have a lot of life major changes all at once purposefully. So you don't get married, move, have the kid, maybe the baby's on the way, and do all of those things all at the same time. It could be a really hard thing to do. Now, some things are obviously, you can't avoid everything, but it's a good thing to not have major things. How many of you guys are, I like change people? I'm okay with it. And how many people hate change? All right, I'm a hate change sort of person. Living in the same place for more than 20 years. I feel like my life sometimes feels like Groundhog Day, where it's the same thing over and over, season after season after. It's like the same thing, ebb and flow of Ellendale life, but it's a good thing. I've come to really get used to it. And I don't really like change, actually. All right, organized. Who's organized and who's not?
What I want
Okay, nobody has any organizational skills?
Well, hey.
All right, organized. All right, who's the people pleasers? Oh, more than not. Okay, I wouldn't say that I am in general a people pleaser. Emotionally steady, we're not going to ask. All right, so that's it. So any questions on this counseling thing? All right, so when, if you go through this yourself, something like this, or if you become a person that is a facilitator in a counseling thing, obviously there's a lot of different things to go through. All right, so you want to give people time to really go with it in ways that are interesting to them. Like sometimes you don't want to push something if it's just like, we got this. You want to go somewhere where it's maybe, this is more of a problem area. Let's look at that. All right, so that's premarital counseling. All right, so now we're going to get married here.
Yes.
Finally, we're getting married.
I don't want to go to school.
All right, I need a drink. All right, getting married. So happily ever after or not. So So plan for what happens after the wedding, after the honeymoon. Because usually the trajectory is, gosh, I gotta get to this day and then I'll breathe. And then we'll figure it out from there. So in general, you should be thinking even beyond that of, immediate life goals, how you're gonna react to being married together. The first year of marriage is the biggest adjustment of all your married years, except for probably when you get the first kid. But it's a huge, huge adjustment to just being together. So remember that marriage is about being the right mate. All right, so it's about getting yourself to the point where you can be a loving person to somebody else. All right, so married life requires staying power in something which is established in the critical first weeks and months after the honeymoon. So it's a very vulnerable time too. All right, you might have to go into it with certain expectations and think that the other person is going to act in a certain way, and you might encounter maybe behaviors or things that you're like, oh gosh, I didn't know they were going to be like this, or disappointments that you might have. I remember when I first got married, this is 1994, so it's pre-internet days, and my husband is an information seeker, right to the max. So back then, you had to go to libraries, you had to read books and magazines, and he was always the type that has stacks and stacks of them. I just remember feeling like, is this guy ever gonna stop reading? And like really being shocked by it, because I hadn't spent all my time with him to realize that he actually spent that much time reading, and he does spend that much time reading. And if you're ever over our house, he's actually reading while he's talking to you, like all the time. It's kind of like a constant need for, what is that personality thing where he's the number 5, what do we call that one? The Enneagram. He's the 5, so the information gatherer, and it just never ever ends. And I remember that was an adjustment for me. Like realizing, oh, okay, he's going to be spending a lot of time doing reading. Now I don't mind it so much. Sometimes I'll tell him to go read, because he also talks a lot. All right. Okay, so the choices a couple makes in the early years of marriage set the tone. Right, so you end up picking up automatic behaviors in how you act towards one another in the first year. So if you set a tone of, being easily irritated about certain things, you generally keep that as a habit. So you want to be careful in those early years to set the tone of being what you want it to be. So choices should be made by couples and brought to God. So it's a time when you're used to making your own decisions, but now it becomes everything is an us decision. So you going out to do something on a particular night a week, now instead of it just being you, it's definitely an us sort of situation. I want to do this. So running like just about everything by the other person. How you spend your money, how you spend your time. All of those things change to an us thing. And then the big choices, obviously, being brought to God is maybe a little more obvious. All right, choices should be reevaluated and renegotiated at regular intervals throughout marriage. So as you make decisions together, you assess whether they're working or not. Is this working for you where you're at? Like if you have made choices about, say, a job, how much you're going to work, is this a good fit for you? Is it working for the family life balance? I remember that when we were in seminary, it was very difficult to survive. We had to each work half-time in order to get a full-time-ish sort of salary, only it's like at minimum wage, so it's hardly, couldn't really call it full-time. But we both had to work, and I remember it being, where you're opposite shifting. where you're not spending time together. And I remember that was a particularly hard time. Well, I was working in an Alzheimer's unit as a CNA, which is like brutal work to begin with. And it was in nights, and then I would be home, he'd be asleep, and then before I woke up, he'd be off doing his job. So a difficult time. So we had to reevaluate that and think, is this working? And make some different decisions. And so we're able to shift things around. So any choice you make, if it's not working, you gotta reevaluate it and change it. All right, what difference does marriage make? So changes in self-concept and the relationship. So things change in how you view you and how you view the relationship like it was when you were dating. So communication patterns and roles which were established during your courtship time are renegotiated after marriage. So something that might have worked while you're dating might not work as time goes on. All right, so there's changes in self-concept. So seeing things from me to we, which you do somewhat while you're dating and more when you're engaged, but then it's even more so when you're married. And then also learning to have a separate yet together identity. All right, so making choices to allow people to pursue interests that the other person might not have. I don't know, what sort of examples can you think of this? Like a hobby of some sort? Time, maybe if you're an extrovert, introvert, this could be a thing where you're making a choice as the maybe introvert to allow the extrovert to spend more time with other people. So all of those things about having a separate yet together identity. All right, changes to the relationship. So marriage requires more work on the mundane things of life. So the earning money, what else? Household chores. So it's not as fun. So the relationship feels a little bit different. Spouses tend to be less tolerant of each other than when they were dating. So maybe all the cutesy things are not so cutesy anymore. And maybe things that didn't bother you before tend to start bothering you. So unrealistic expectations develop and you can be disillusioned by them. So like I was saying, I thought that we were going to spend more time together without all the reading material involved, and it was disillusioning, and then I had to reevaluate and realize this is a need for him, this is who he is, and then make an allowance for that to make it work. All right, any thoughts on this? So it's a huge time of change. Have you guys heard of couples that really struggle the first year? Heard of some? I would say in general, I'd say that our marriage was probably easier than I felt like my peers at the time. And I kind of think that it was probably due to us having somewhat similar personalities. In cases where there's somebody that is a widely varied personality, I feel like it can be a bit more contentious and a lot more fighting in the first year. So it can be a bit more difficult. So the first year, definitely hard. All right, changes to other relationships. So spending more time together and less time with friends. All right, so your friends change because you find that when you hang out with them, you have less in common with them. All right, so you end up choosing a whole possible new friend group of people, making friends with people who are more in your stage of life. Maybe, so if you're newly married, you might likely choose more couples as friends, to have friends together, or maybe even on your own, having just friend with one person or the other. So friends change. Gaining a spouse's family. All right, so this is the good, the bad, and the ugly things. All right, so you might gain traditions that you like, that really add to your life. Benefits, you can have money. Problems. When my husband married into my family, he had to marry into the craziness of me dealing with my mom. And when my mom was alive, it was a really hard thing. At one point, When we lived here, she was homeless in New York City, drunk and homeless on the streets. And from here, we had to try to navigate how to deal with that. And then I know that my husband had to really be a huge support and help to me for getting through the issues that I have with my mom. So trying to figure out how to deal with it, what to do. And he didn't really sign up for that. Sometimes you don't sign up for realizing that your spouse might have a difficult family and that you have to navigate through all those issues of it. Another thing is that he has never liked going on family vacations with my side of the family. It's always been, one year we went to Disney World, and I mean, he was just done with them. And for years, every time we had family vacations, he wouldn't go, except for this last summer, he finally caved in and we went to Punta Cana, and he actually did okay with them. But they drive him crazy. So the family, your in-laws, might drive you crazy, all right? Or they might not. They might be a positive thing. All right, so sharing time and holidays. Yeah.
I was gonna say, should your in-laws be a consideration for marriage? Like, if he has a crazy family?
Yeah, it is a consideration in that crazy families can produce crazy people.
Okay.
I'm not crazy.
Okay, I'm not saying that you can't be redeemed from a broken family, because I came from a very broken family. I'm not saying I'm all put together, but you are signing up for more problems probably if a person comes from a very challenging family. There's way more history. There's way more healing that has to take place and growth than you probably realize.
Strong individual.
Yeah, you can come out pretty strong. I'm tough as nails.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Ouch. I'd say, like, when it comes to marriage, that's one thing I'm really, really concerned about, like, and really vulnerable, like, when it comes to, like, my colored women, my worldview was really corrupt about black women, because coming from the ghetto.
You mean having a negative view towards them?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
coming from the ghetto, like, the world, they just shove black women as a, impulsive and just a brutal bunch of women. They're just ghetto and ratchet all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it just wrecked me whenever I saw a black woman, because that was all I seen.
Right.
And when I came to the Lord, He's really still working on me and how I view my culture, you know. So there's a lot of culture that ties in, you know, for me with black people.
Yeah.
But the Lord has walked me through that, and He's healed me, because if I look at myself in the mirror and I look at every person that's my color, I see it like that. But yeah, that's my tangent.
All right, so family, you marry the family too, somewhat. All right, whether you have a lot of interaction with them or not, the effects of it are there. All right, so the brokenness that my mom had in her life affected me deeply. And I didn't really feel like I felt like I bore the weight of it very, very heavily until after she died. And when she died, 2 years before she died, she called me up on the phone one day and said, "Guess who got saved?" And I was like, what? She had gotten saved 20 years after I started praying for her. And for years and years and years and years, we struggled with throwing her in the detox unit, having her only to come out again and to go back in, be homeless on the streets, do all these horrendously painful things to herself, which hurt us so badly. And it hurt me deeply. And she got saved. She started to get discipled. It wasn't perfect, but when she died, she knew God. And actually, after she died, I finally felt like I could finally breathe. Like God had redeemed a broken situation, and then the weight that it meant on my life was just like starting to shake off. I don't have to carry, like, every time I heard a siren go off in Ellendale, I thought it was them going for her. Because she had gone in an ambulance, like, constantly because she was so ill at the end. She smoked herself to death. That's how she died, 61 years old. And I had to care for her the last 2 years of her life in Ellendale. So it was always a constant wait. And then after she died, I was just like, felt finally, I've been free of this. But it was such a beautiful, redemptive story. And to have God allow me to be part of that, it was so meaningful to me. That I saw God take somebody's broken life, redeem them, heal me of the pain of it, and help me to have a beautiful family unlike the one that I grew up in. So it was a really beautiful story in the end. So when you marry somebody, you marry their family, and it can be difficult to navigate, right? And some are easier than others. But you should still be courageous, in wanting to be a vessel of redemption to your spouse's family.
Amen.
All right, where are we at? All right, sharing time and holidays. So, I remember this was a huge disappointment to me when I got married. So my family was, one of the things we did well was we celebrated birthdays and holidays top style. And I always looked forward to it. My husband's family, dull. And we as a family have inherited this dullness. And I hate it to this day. We're not good at celebrating. And it's, my husband's family was like that. It's kind of like they see life more as, yeah, we're together, life is good, this, they don't really see maybe celebrating as much, and I kind of wish that it was a little bit different. So that was an adjustment for me, not being home for Christmases and Thanksgivings. We would alternate in the beginning, and then as we moved out here to North Dakota, it just became too far to go to New York all the time. So we didn't see them as much, but that's an adjustment. Like how you spend holidays. Do you guys come from families where you celebrate birthdays big time? See, I did too. And my husband's like, he doesn't say it's his birthday. He doesn't care one bit at all. He's not very celebratory. So it's a bit different. I try to still have birthday things for my kids, but for him, he could care less. All right, relationship with family of origin changes. So your relationship to your parents change. So parents become more of a consultant. So parents have to learn to take the role of you give advice, but you allow the person to make more of their own mistakes than you did probably when they were under your care. All right, but you can't be overly involved. Couple must learn financial and emotional independence. So you have to emotionally, instead of, if you as a girl have a problem and you're used to running to your mom, you need to run to your husband. All right, it becomes inappropriate to seek too much emotional help from family or friends over a spouse. It's not that you don't get support from family and friends, but you have to make sure that the spouse is the primary person that you're emotionally connected to, and then the other people then become secondary support. That's an adjustment. You might have to say to yourself, you might find yourself automatically behaving in certain ways, and you have to change it. All right, so there's the concept from Genesis 2:24. A man should leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So it's moving from one family to you are your new family, and you're trying to create that. And it's not that you don't go to it for advice to your family of origin, they just don't dictate it anymore. You become your own unit. All right, any thoughts here? All right, we'll move on. All right, we did these myths already, so we're not really going to linger on this. This was the marriage benefits men more than women. We think not, it's more equal. Good luck, romantic love, no, we need obvious things like communication, commitment. We did this one too. Most divorces are in the first 7 years of marriage. The most recent statistic I saw actually said 8. So if you get past this 7-year itch and life is difficult, you get to see the highs on the other side. All right, so there's highs and lows in marriage, and when you go through the highs and lows, you will reap the reward one day of having, seeing those good times and seeing a better thing. So a lot of people don't even get past that major hump by 7 years. All right, we talked about the cohabitation thing, except for maybe the lower health benefit concept. Have you guys ever heard that married people are generally healthier? This is like a proven thing, that the health of married people in general throughout all of the United States is higher when you're older if you're a married person than if you're single. Why do you think that would be? You're looking out for each other. Loneliness is probably a huge, how you feel emotionally affects how you do physically. All right, so loneliness could be a huge factor.
You know what? I was listening to yesterday.
Yeah.
He said that if you're lonely, it's the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
Right, it can be that detrimental to your health.
Okay.
Like not feeling well emotionally matters physically. And so if you are on your own. So married people tend to do better, financially better off. You don't have 2 separate incomes. You're blended together. Hopefully you've saved money before you die. All right. All right, not having conflict thing. So the real truth is you're more likely to have conflict the deeper that you are connected with one another. So it's probably a red flag in a relationship if no conflict ever happens at all. All right, that means you don't care. Somebody is de-invested, or somebody's not being
You're
honest.
not fighting.
Yeah, you have to be able to really be honest about who you are. All right, so couples who say they don't have conflict may have a communication problem in the first place.
That's funny.
All right, any other marriage myths you can think of? We already did say this, and I don't think we came up with any, did we? Marriages that pray together, stay together. Our Christian cliche, hopefully will work. All right, different models of marriage. This is interesting. All right, so people have different types of relationships out there and different ways they have a marriage, and they don't necessarily think about what it is, but it kind of just looks this way. So it's important to make your own marriage and not just copy models, and a lot of people just copy models. All right, so the first marriage is the pursuer-distancer marriage. So this one is the most common of all these types of marriages, and is the most divorce-prone, and it's number 1 in the divorce rate. So the woman's the pursuer 80% of the time. So this is the woman from our premarital counseling thing. Maria. Maria is very interested in making connections, confronting things, talking, where the man in general prefers to be the one that is avoiding and distance. So 80% of the time it's more likely female. Have you guys seen marriages like this? Pretty common. All right, disengaged marriage. So this one has a high failure rate too. Second in the divorce rate, but they might stay married for a long time. Both are self-sufficient and do not need or fear intimacy for a sense of well-being. So they have little in common and have difficulty connecting. So it's basically 2 people living together under a roof that are not very well emotionally connected to one another.
They're roommates.
They're roommates, right? And they might actually be somewhat content in that too. Doesn't mean that they're unhappy with it. All right, so they're just disengaged. He does his thing, she does her thing.
Wait. Can we see that dynamic through, like, you said through roommates too? So, like, one of my questions is, so, like, the dynamic in roommates can be, like, a dynamic in a relationship?
Well, meaning that they might live together as husband and wife,
Right.
but they're not very well emotionally connected to one another.
Okay.
So they might pursue their own interests, their own hobbies, spend very little time together. You know, they have, maybe they're part of the house, the other person's part of the house. So they're kind of like roommates, but they're married.
Okay.
Yeah.
But,
All right, the operatic marriage. This is like the one from, I don't know, some sort of TV drama. But these are the types where you have breakup and reconciling over and over. Third highest divorce rate, so there's intense emotions. So vicious fighting, followed by passionate lovemaking. All right, so they're very high on the emotional scales. Yeah, the real toxic types. So it's like the crazy couple. All right, so this is one of the most common relationships where you're going to find some sort of abuse pattern, where there's emotional, physical abuse going either way towards the male or the female. All right, so an operatic marriage. All right, so the other day I was telling you guys about that one couple that had the sexual expectations matched, nothing else did. That's operatic marriage. All right, so there's quite a few of those out there. All right, next one is cohesive, individuated marriage. So this one's considered a good marriage. Couples like spending time together. They're pretty well knit. But at the same time, they have autonomy. They're themselves. They have personal freedom. Chores and responsibilities are shared. There's equality. So this one has the second lowest divorce rate. And when these marriages break down, it is when the partner becomes more me-focused. So they somehow have some change. Let's say it's like the case of somebody who was suddenly a stay-at-home mom, and then they decide they're going to go out and get a job, and they're going to completely neglect the family or something like that. Some major shift occurs, and then it gets bouncy. All right, then traditional marriage. Traditional marriage, lowest divorce rate, so change is the biggest threat if either spouse behaves in an untraditional way. Roles are clearly defined. The wife plays the expressive role. She tends to meet the emotional needs of the family and home. So it's following the female nurture. And then the husband assumes the instrumental role of providing. If these couples divorce, it's often the first time the woman has experienced her own autonomy to discover her own strengths and talents apart from her husband. So very traditional. All right, let's do, who wants to do their presentation now?
I'll do it.
All right, Dylan's up.
You dog?
All right. I went ahead and did a sermon. Let me pull up my notes real quick.
Preach it.
Can I have 3 people who'd be willing to read some scripture for me?
I got you.
Trevin, I want you to pull up John 30, verses 20 through 21. I'm gonna have you do Genesis 2:25, and then Emma, you can do Galatians 6:2.
Sorry. John, what now?
John chapter 3, verses 20 and 21.
Did he say 30?
Yeah.
Did I say 30?
Yeah.
That's my bad. I see. Yeah. No. 3.
He's like, my Bible doesn't have it.
All right. Obviously, we've been in class. There's a lot to a marriage, right? It's very complicated. It's a wonderful thing, right? But there's a lot of bells and whistles to it, if you will. So, who had Genesis? You want to read Genesis 22:25 for me?
Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame.
Right?
This is the second
Imagine-
year in a row we've done the whole, we've heard the naked concept.
Yeah. Can you read that one more time? The last bit, starting from they were naked.
And they felt no shame.
And they felt no shame. Wouldn't that be great in a marriage where you can be
Only if it
naked?
was warm. I mean, let's be serious, it's not gonna be okay today.
No, I would hope no one here is going to be comfortable with getting naked. Please don't. That's points.
Then it makes you wonder, is the cold part of the fall?
Moving swiftly on, right?
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
What makes a marriage really good is that you can be, metaphorically speaking, naked with your partner. And hopefully, if you do it right, you can do it without feeling shame, just as Adam and Eve did. Granted, this was before they fall, and then they ate the fruit, and then they were ashamed anyway. But that's beside the point, right? So, oftentimes it can be difficult to get vulnerable and be open with your partner, right? But it's good in a marriage. So, let me go over a few. Anyway,
What is in your pocket?
it's my incense bowl.
Oh!
Let me go over a few reasons why you should be vulnerable with your partner and what the Bible says about it. So my first point is that you should be vulnerable about your imperfections, right? Who here is perfect? Funny. Right? No one here is perfect. We've all screwed up. We've all sinned. I'm sure if, we went out and was like, oh man, this is the worst thing I've done, you probably would be like, oh my word, I can't even look at this person the same way anymore. Right? We've all screwed up, and we have all done wrong in the eyes of the Lord. Right? So, now take that to the eyes of a marriage, right? You're not going to have a perfect partner. I know people, oh man, I'm just looking for the perfect guy or I'm looking for the perfect girl, but really, there is no such thing, because there was only one perfect person, and unless you're one of the weirdos who thought Mary Magdalene, whatever, Jesus wasn't into that, right? Yeah, so you're never going to find the perfect partner, right? But
It's frustrating though.
it is. I wish I could be the perfect partner, right? Because then, that's a whole nother. We don't need to get into that. Right? So who had John? You want to read John for me?
John 3:20-21.
John 3:20 and 21, yes.
Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God.
Yes. That's good. Thank you, Trevor. Appreciate it. So, we as Christians, we want to put stuff into the light. Now, what the expectation is, I hope no one's going to come up front and just say, like, this is the absolute most worst thing I've ever done to everybody. There's a limit, right? Trevin, sit down. Right? But when we are trying to grow in a relationship with Christ, or in this kind of concept too, with each other, whether it be with our spouses, with our friends, whatever, right? You're going to want to bring things to the light. Can I pick on you guys for a second?
No, that's my
Depends what you
friend.
say.
It won't be bad, I promise. Faith. Would you rather Theo come forward to you and admit that he picks his nose, or would you rather hear from Karen Thurber about his bad habits about picking his nose? Right, exactly. So, same thing with the marriage. Obviously, hopefully it's not picking your nose, really silly example, but there's a lot of marriages which you can look up, and I obviously don't have the statistics, but where one or both spouses are addicted to pornography, or are in other sexual relations, or some other agreed drugs, alcohol, that sort of deal. And what they try to do is they try and hide those things from their partner, trying to help them, right? Trying to, not trying to affect them in any way of that sort. But really what that does is when your partner's going to find out, that's just going to be a catastrophic instance and failure to that relationship. So when you're being vulnerable with your partner, as hard as it may be to admit that you pick your nose, right? You got to be vulnerable with your partner. And hopefully, if they truly love you, they're going to be willing to walk with you and maybe even be a part of that young trip. So, if you want to have a deeper connection with your partner, you need to first Be vulnerable about your imperfections. All right, moving on. We also need to be vulnerable to your partner about your weaknesses. Similarly to imperfections, everyone here has got their weaknesses, right? So, and it's going to be the same. Your partner is going to have weaknesses. Galatians 6:2, if you would, please.
Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ.
Yes. What makes a romantic relationship beautiful, right, is that you are now doing life together. Right, it's the two become one, right? And sure, you can have your friends who will help you. Like, I've got my friends that I talk to, and I explain some certain things, that sort of deal. And there's your family, right? But there's just something about this God-given, God-created connection where the two become one. And then you bear each other's burdens through life, right? Till death do you part, hopefully. So, where was I? To use a personal example, right? I struggle with depression. There's times where I just don't love the person that God has made me to be, and I struggle to see that. There's times where I can't even look in the mirror and look at myself and be like, yeah, no, I like what I see, right? So now imagine I meet this super pretty girl, right? Gorgeous. That's what I'm saying, right? And I go into this relationship, we start off great, but I don't admit to her, hey, man, I'm just struggling with some mental health, and being aware that's my weakness, right? I don't tell her this, I let her live in blissful ignorance. Now, say one day I wake up and, man, I'm just having a really bad depressive episode, or I just don't love myself. I can't look at myself in the mirror, that sort of deal. And all these thoughts and negative thoughts about myself start going through my head, and I can't talk to her about it because I'm not willing to show that I have this weakness, right? And now I'm thinking, oh, there's no way she can like me for who I am. I don't like myself. Why would she? Man, she's probably, right? Paige, you feel me? I can see the pouty face.
That just sounds really sad.
It is, right? And so, but then now, with that, you've built this foundation of your marriage or other relationship on this false foundation of man, I've got it all put together, right? And that's just a personal example. There may be other things that you may struggle with, that sort of deal, that if you're going to build a false foundation on that relationship, it's going to fail, right? So you need to be transparent with your partner about, hey, man, I'm really struggling with fill in the blank, right? And again, if they're willing to love you and are willing to, walk with you, and she can totally, or he, right? She can totally be a part of this healing journey. So if you want to have a deeper connection with your partner, then you've got to be vulnerable about your weaknesses. All right, last point. Thank you. You also got to be vulnerable about your emotions and your feelings. Who here gets emotional? Who here doesn't like to get emotional? Who here doesn't like to admit when they're emotional or feeling, right? Who, let's put it this way, who bottles their emotions? Yeah, that's a big deal. Now imagine you take that mindset into a relationship where, guess what? Your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, they're going to take you off sometimes, right? Just like a sibling would. They know exactly what buttons to press, right? It's going to happen. Or they're going to say something stupid or do something stupid that's going to hurt your feelings, right? And you can either, oh man, I'm just going to bottle it in. I'm not going to say nothing. I'm not going to talk to them about it, but I'm just going to be ticked off at them for the rest of the day, right? That's a pretty bad thing, right? I hope we can agree on that. So you want to be transparent and also vulnerable with your emotions. And then I'm going to go ahead and read Matthew 26:38. Here we go. This is Jesus. He's talking to Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, John and James. He just says to them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and watch with me." Right? So this is Jesus being vulnerable with his disciples. Right? And so here's my thought process. I'm Jesus Christ. Not actually, just for the example. I'm about to take on the weight of the sin of the world. Right? Everyone sins. This is crazy, right? And I would assume he's probably strong enough to take this one other thing, like, oh man, I really feel like, man, I'm just distressed to the point of death. But I can keep that in. I can carry that, right? I mean, he's the Son of Man, right? But he's still willing to open up to his disciples, right? And he even know, right? Jesus knows everything. He knew his disciples were going to fall asleep on him, right? Like, right after. And hopefully, if you're in a relationship, you're not going to fall asleep on your spouse when they're trying to be open to you. Please don't do that. It doesn't work. Right? But Jesus was open with his disciples. And hopefully most of us can agree that Jesus is a good example and role model for how we should live our lives, correct? So we should also be going about being vulnerable about our feelings and our emotions with people, especially our partners. Emotions are complicated, and you can't just know what's going on with your partner if they sit here and make a grouchy face, right? You know something's wrong, but if they're not willing to communicate with you that something's wrong, you're not going to be able to solve the problem, right? So you've got to communicate. Hey, you said something really stupid that really hurt me earlier, right? Or you did this thing, and it ticked me off, and like, you're better than it. Something of that sort, right? You got to communicate your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions with your partner if you want to have that deeper connection. To conclude, everybody, I want you to get naked with your partner. Metaphorically speaking, please. Right? Unless you're married, and then that's a God-given whatever.
It's cold.
Well,
There's blankets.
I was going to say, there's blankets.
Yeah.
Right? So be vulnerable with your partner. Love is a tough thing. It's complicated. And it's a lot of work. And part of that work is being vulnerable and being open with your partner and trusting in who they are. Right? So for those of you guys who are in relationships, or starting a new relationship, just got married, or perhaps are in a dating relationship, right? Get with your partner. And if you're not already vulnerable, take some time and open up to each other. And if you guys, again, truly love each other, this could be a total segue to just an absolute amazing relationship that is founded in Christ Jesus and in each other. So that's what I got. Thank you guys.
So, are you going to be a pastor?
Youth pastor, yes.
He is quite, he's great. You got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Come on,
Do my best.
That was really
All right, so those were the different models. So traditional is pretty similar to what, we would agree with the traditional role of marriage, and also this cohesive individuated one could be an acceptable form, we could say. All right, so just looking at the biblical model, so what are some aspects, things that you'd look at? So, first thing, covenant concept, which Theo was talking about yesterday. So partnering together with God, having the two people together and God. Grace, so recognizing that marriage partners are sinful and in need of grace. All right, sometimes that's hard to accept when the person does wrong. You have to make a choice to realize that they, like you, the easiest way to give grace is to realize how horrendous you are yourself. All right, you have to realize you are a decrepit sinner capable of doing anything at any time. Once you really have a good grasp on that, showing grace to the other person becomes easier. Empowerment. So, biblical marriage seeks to empower each other, partners empower each other to be all that God wants them to be. And also you have the addition of the Spirit in your relationship, helping you to grow and be who you're supposed to be. So God needs to be a vital part of this relationship, the three together. All right, marriage is to resemble his relationship with us. So marriage is analogous to how God relates to us in loving and showing his love. All right, any other things that you would say about the biblical model? Other things that aren't included?
Very good.
What's that?
There's sermon I was listening to yesterday, but I might not have a full comprehension of what you're saying. But it goes on to say that you should marry them in body first. Like, if you're looking for somebody, because most people are not called to singleness. I know that in our generation, we're like, oh, we're called to singleness, but the fact is like the majority of the time not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a smaller percentage that is.
Probably.
And the thing is, you you have to marry into the spiritual body of Christ when you're looking for that equally yoked person.
Okay, so going into the body of Christ, meaning the church,
And the well.
to find this
Yeah,
person.
Being at your own spiritual well.
Okay,
You know, because as you're walking in singleness, it's really easy to get lonely and compromised. But there's a dependence on Christ in that season of where you're seeking Christ, and then boom, you find somebody who's seeking Christ,
right.
and you meet at that well.
All right, so you're focused on your priorities,
Yep.
and then hopefully God brings somebody that's like-minded
Pretty
your
much.
way, yeah. All right, family planning thing. All right, so delayed childbearing. So many people, when they decide to get married, choose frequently to delay starting having a family. All right, some people don't make that decision and they say, I want to have family right away. What are some of the factors that affect this decision? What do you think?
The age you get married?
Biggest thing is the age you get married, probably. All right, so if you're getting married at 35, you're not going to wait 5 years.
No, you're gonna have kids right
So age, sometimes what else?
What we mentioned earlier of like big life changes.
Big life changes, right? You're like, we're not really ready for this stressor yet.
The location where you live at.
Okay, so what would that entail?
Well, I suppose like if where you're at is like extremely rural, it doesn't have a good school system, and like maybe your location is very poor, you'd rather save up and go somewhere where they have better opportunities.
Okay. All right, so where you're living, like where you'd be starting up a family, it is a consideration, I would say. Like you don't want to have a family in a place that's not pleasant. All right, what does the Bible say about kids? It's positive, right?
Yes,
The Bible says having children is a great thing, that it's a huge blessing. All right, so in general, your attitude should be openness to having this blessing in your life. You could be called to not have children, but most people don't feel that way. And in general, the Bible sees children as a huge blessing. So some reasons for delayed childbearing, taking time to strengthen the relationship is usually one of the first factors of somebody that's young. They say we want to get used to one another first, establish who we are, figure it out. Take time to become financially secure. Okay, this one here I'd hold a little bit lighter, all right, because when are you really going to be financially secure? Particularly all of you going into ministry, financial security is just not part of the package. All right, so you have to be somewhat, you've got to have a financial plan. You know, you want to succeed. You don't want to be impoverished. But really getting this nailed down, you're going to be waiting forever if you try to do it. Getting married later in life, career starting or advancement, that can be a thing, whether you're like, is this a good time for that? Addicted to additional income. Sometimes people make decisions to have children and they don't want to give up having a job in the first place and lose that income. All right, one consideration that I feel is huge is the fact that fertility declines already at age 30. Okay, so your ability to have a child when you're 20 years old to 30 is already different. It's already decreasing. All right, from 30 to 35, it exponentially gets lower. 35 to 40, even more so, to the point where you're over 40, you are less likely, very, very less likely. Does anybody have, your parents gave birth to you older? How old?
My mom was like, I think 28 or 29.
Okay, that's not too old. I had Theo when I was 31 and Aiden when I was 33. My first one was 23 though. So mine were 10 years apart. But anybody close to over 35?
My mom had my little brother when she was 40.
Okay, so that's an example. In general, you guys have very traditional parents. which is probably a little bit different than culture, where they did have kids younger
I think my mom was like 36 when she had me.
when she had you.
36?
So not too old, but fertility starts going down. So it's a consideration that it's an issue. And like we were looking at the other day about the statistics about the average age of people having kids is getting later and later and later. And what we're seeing is countries are having fewer children throughout the whole world because they are delaying marriage and they are delaying the choice to have kids. And when you do that, fertility is a huge part of it. All right, another, just obvious reasons to have your kids young is it's like when I had a kid at 33, it was a huge difference on me physically than when I was 23 even. You can really tell. All right, birth control methods. So we'll look at the book. The book is not good because the book's dated as far as... Can somebody tell me what page that was on? What did it say? The book is a bit dated. I got it here. But we can look at this as generalities. All right, you guys have all really looked at birth control. This is like not a new topic, right? I mean, we're all got general ideas of these sort of things. So we're not going to go into a lot of specific things other than to look at big picture concepts. So as far as birth control goes, what are some considerations? What are we looking into? Yeah.
More currently, after, you consider your plan and everything for kids,
Okay.
with a woman's birth control, if it's like a hormonal one, how it's going to affect her emotions and like other physical changes, like you're probably going to get or more easy to gain weight and...
Okay, so there's side effects to any hormonal birth control.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a consideration. Okay, I think that the biggest thing out there is when you get to this stage, all right, information that we have about birth control right now, you can look it up and try to figure out things. When you get to the stage that you want to make this decision, you need to, what I would say, really look into it. All right, so when doing research on what sort of birth control you should use, the number one consideration is this consistent with, your views towards life beginning at conception? All right, by conception we mean egg, sperm meeting together. All right, that's generally what evangelicals would say is the beginning of life. A lot of people in the medical community see more the beginning of life as being when implantation occurs. All right, so that's a difference. We don't really agree with that. I mean, most evangelicals will say no, life begins at the moment of conception. So when you're reading things, you might see, conception, this method does not, this method prevents conception in the first place. All right, find out what they mean by that. Does that mean implantation or not? So as far as hormonal birth control pills go, they are hormonal, not only birth control, but you guys know the concept of IUD, the intrauterine device. All right, intrauterine devices also are a hormonal form of birth control. Okay, so that is as well. All right, so one thing to consider is that hormonal forms of birth control affect not only the release of an egg. You guys have a good time at your game. Play well, don't get hurt. All right, not only the release of the egg, but the ability for it to implant. Okay, so a hormonal sort of thing is going to make the lining of the uterus hostile for an egg to get there. Okay, So one thing to consider is, I feel less comfortable with hormonal birth control pills than maybe some people do, or a hormonal IUD. Because the possibility of pregnancy occurring, of an egg being fertilized, is low, but it is there, okay? And that would be fine if there wasn't also this side effect of the whole uterine lining getting messed up from the hormones and not allowing it to implant. So then it causes the baby to not be able to develop. So I think there's considerations. I think that it's what it appears to be is a small risk, but I personally don't feel comfortable ethically with that sort of risk. Because if the risk is there, then it's something that we have to consider from an ethical standpoint. Another thing to know is that when you're doing research, information is kind of always has an agenda, right? They're not always open and honest. So the primary purpose of a hormonal form of birth control pill is to prevent ovulation. They will say that openly, but frequently they don't say the other side of it, and that it can cause problems. There's two different types of IUDs. There's hormonal. There's one that just uses copper, which acts as a spermicidal sort of thing. It creates a hostile environment for the sperm, makes them unhappy. That can make it pregnancy not occur in the first place, but it also makes the uterine wall inhospitable. All right, so I feel even less comfortable with that. I don't think that there's any ethical considerations with any barrier methods. There's no problem, I think, with that. I think that the family planning concept is a great concept if it's done well. You know, if you're somebody who is highly disciplined, ethically considering things, that's the best plan, I think, and it's also, I feel like it's the best plan for the woman physically as far as side effects and general overall health. So that's kind of my opinions on the birth control thing. So I kind of feel like I'm not really saying like being prescriptive in what I would say other than what I think about it. And just to help you guys realize that when the time comes, really take the decision very seriously because it is about life, right? And there are consequences to that and choices we make. We might not know certain things, but the things we know, we should take it seriously and be concerned about life. So that's what I would say. Any thoughts? Yeah.
So what's the lesser of the two? Getting your tubes tied, or?
Okay, yeah, so getting your tubes tied, also a viable option. Not obviously, most people don't want to do that until after they've decided that their family is done.
Would you say that getting your tubes tied is healthier than getting birth control?
Healthier? Not necessarily. I mean, I don't know if I would say it's healthier. I mean,
They're both.
I
still
suppose.
bad,
they're moving away from tubal ligation. Okay, so I just recently heard that women who are making choices to finish childbearing and want tubal ligation, they're now removing fallopian tubes instead. All right, a fallopian tube would be tubes coming from a uterus to the ovary area, okay? So when you remove the fallopian tubes, what they're finding is that cases of cervical cancer, when they actually look at the cells, it's actually not cervical cancer, ovarian cancer, which is highly deadly. We had a student here when we first moved here who was in her early 20s who died of ovarian cancer, and we watched, I had to witness her slowly dying, over a year and a half or so. They say that ovarian cancer is actually fallopian tube cancer, so they're moving away from tubal ligations and removing fallopian tubes instead entirely. to prevent ovarian cancer in some way.
Wow, that's great.
In general, they say, like, if you're choosing a tubal ligation over vasectomy, they say vasectomies are a way easier option, less invasive
For men.
for men.
The reason why I mentioned 2 times was because after my mom had her 8th kid, she had her 2.
8th kid. Ooh,
I'm the
she's
oldest.
courageous, going 8.
I'm the oldest boy, the second oldest. I got one older sister.
That is a lot, that's a bunch.
2 sets of twins.
Wow.
All right, so yeah, that's the most permanent, the vasectomy and tubal ligation. But those decisions, do not make a permanent decision when you're young, guys. I highly, highly discourage you from, even if you have 2 children, I had my first 2 kids, and they wore me out so badly that it took 6 years for Theo to come. Okay, I thought we were done. And then I was like, oh gosh, I was deciding actually my whole life I wanted to be a nurse. And I started going to school before we moved here, and then when we came here, I started doing some classes actually here at Trinity, and I was gonna go somewhere else to finish my degree. And then I started feeling strongly that I wanted to have Theo. And then my husband said, if we have Theo, Theo has to have someone else. And I was like, mind blown. We're gonna do the double thing. So we had to have Theo and Iden, his sidekick that came 2 years later.
Amen.
And I gave up my dream of being a nurse in order to have these kids.
Praise the Lord.
And
I love
no
you.
turning back.
We appreciate it. We're glad you're here.
But to say, there was those 6 years where I thought I was done, and if I'd made a permanent decision, then that would have been something that I would have regretted.
Right.
So don't make that decision while you're young. That's something you're looking at. Permanent decisions can be made like after 35 and forward. 60, you're not gonna have the kid anyway. That's a permanent decision, sure.
What's that called? That women
Menopause.
Yeah. Really, you don't even have to decide. You just hit menopause.
You just hit. All right, so any thoughts about anything else? Oh, this thing here, progesterone only pills. Have you guys ever heard of these? This is a form of birth control that only uses progesterone and not estrogen. Okay, it's frequently used for while mothers are nursing as a way to not suppress milk production. All right, so when moms give birth to a baby, they have a massive loss of estrogen. That's why there's a lot of things with postpartum depression, because you go from feeling really good to it's like the worst PMS of your entire life for months on months and months, and it's an adjustment, right? So progesterone only pills only work by ruining the uterine lining. They don't prevent ovulation. All right, you might not be able to get pregnant while nursing, but you might. All right, in general, nursing blocks ovulation, but it becomes less so of an issue as the baby gets older, and it also depends on the person.
Wait. Can you dumb that down? So,
Don't
dumb it down. So, like, what, and my personal understanding is that once a woman stops producing milk, then she can have another kid.
Usually.
Oh.
And this is true for all mammals.
Wow.
Like when they stop taking care of producing milk, it increases estrogen levels and cycles begin to develop. But this isn't a foolproof. This isn't a birth control method. Like, you don't want to use nursing as a birth control method while that's, or else you can have. My first 2 kids were 15 months apart, but it was deliberate. And guys, it was hard. They were close in age.
Yeah. So usually it takes about 2 years
Well, it depends on how long you're nursing, but after a kid is 6 months old, they start eating food and you nurse less.
Right.
So the likelihood of pregnancy would be higher after 6 months than it would be before. And then by 2 years, yeah, you're probably, the person's gonna be prepping to have a kid for sure. Yeah. All right.
We better leave.
Yeah. Good class, guys.
Oh, we didn't get to do her thing.
Oh, that's
I got time.
We got
We
time.
do have a couple of
We got
minutes.
5
Do you
minutes.
have,
Yeah,
is
I got
5
5
minutes work for you? Okay, she's, I'm sorry, we forgot. All right, she did adoption and specifically international adoption. How many of you have adopted siblings? Are they international adoption? All right. Oh, biracial, outside of race, I'm sorry. Okay.
So I can include
All right, let's give her our attention, guys. How about Dixie?
okay. So for this, I decided to go on, adopting a child outside of your ethnicity, and it was a podcast by Creating a Family talking about adoption and foster care. And the episode was, should you consider adopting a child of another race or ethnicity? The host was Dawn Davenport, and the guest speaker was Dr. Gina Samuels, I think it was. But, yeah, so basically they kind of went over the struggles and things to be aware of when adopting a child of other ethnicity. So things like being prepared ahead of time. Like the parents should be aware of the needs of the child, or making sure there's other people around them that have the same ethnicity or a very diverse community, because they need somebody to look up to that they can relate to that looks similar to them. So they were talking about how an often problem was where white people would have they call it kind of like a savior complex in a way, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll just save this kid, but then they're not prepared, and yeah, things kind of go downhill from there because they don't know how to take care of the child's needs and different things like that. So it was talking about making sure that you're in a community or have people that you know that are able to give you advice on how to take care of the child, but also that the child can connect with as well. So connecting with families that also adopted outside their ethnicity, but also families that are the child's ethnicity as well. Another thing was it's really important to have them go to a school that also is diverse, so that they connect with kids like them. Also incorporating more of the culture and stuff in the family environment, and also for example, another thing would be instead of just watching a bunch of stuff that's only things that I guess for white people would be a typical white family, or everything is there's no diversity in the shows or in pictures or anything. Make sure that there's different races and ethnicities and stuff. Something else that they mentioned in the podcast was how a lot of people can be very judgmental, especially if you are not taking care of the child properly. So they can tell, for example, for black people, their hair is different than white people's hair, so they can tell if it's not being kept up well. So the parents are automatically going to get criticism for that, or oh great, another white person adopting a black child and not knowing what they're doing. So stuff like that. It's good. It's very important for the parents to like find information on the needs of the child, but also, also maybe like go to doctors and doctors, salons, different places that know how to do that right, take care of the child properly. Another thing was, so also something that they had mentioned was to have friends that are the same ethnicity, but don't be like walking up to some random person like, hey, can you do this stuff for my child? I don't know how to, what to do with this, so how about you be their friend? The host, the guest speaker was talking about how she would meet some white people who would ask her stuff like that. She said it's really awkward because they don't know the person and the child, and it just doesn't go well. And along with that, the child is aware of what the parent is doing. So it's best to already be incorporated in a community, involved in the community, and make friends along the way, and let your child make friends along the way. With family, something that some families will just let fly by is family members like making racist jokes and things, and just being like, oh no, it's fine, that's just how that person is, they're just goofing off. But it can be really offensive to the child and hurtful to them. And it kind of shows, if you don't defend the child, it kind of shows that in a way that you don't fully care about them. So it's important to defend the child on that, but also be communicating with that family member to not do stuff like that. And if things get too bad, to not have any visitations with them and those sort of things. Something that I found interesting was that, I think it was like, there's statistics that adoptive children tend to have worse mental health. I think it's like 3% more than most children, because of a feeling of not belonging or not looking like their family and stuff. So it's very important for the parents to be aware of that and provide support for them, and listen to their needs and all that, those sort of things. Another issue is like if the biological parents come into their life and want to see the child, sometimes the parents will say negative things about the biological parents, but it's not good to do that, because then the child will think that the adopted parents dislike a part of themselves. So a bunch of different aspects there. And so overall, it's just trying to make sure the child feels like they belong, and incorporating community, a good supportive community, and culture, and all those sort of things. Something that I did find interesting was how the child will tend to like really connect with people who look more like them. And my sister, we were mainly in a white community, but the first part of her life and like the family, we were in a Hispanic community, and we were never really around other Asian people. So what's funny is nowadays she's in the Hispanic community in California, and she's dating a guy who's Hispanic. So it's kind of interesting, because it kind of backs up kind of like how connecting with somebody that looks a bit more similar. But like, I know that she really struggled too, because my dad was very much wanting her to be American and white, but my mom, on the other hand, was really trying to be supportive. So I saw both sides of that, of like trying to make the adopted child more like the family, and then my mom wanted her to be more into her culture, and I kind of saw how that affected her And I think it's very important to have them incorporated in their, with other people of the same ethnicity, and incorporating the culture into the home and different things, because it can really leave the child feeling left out. And I don't know, I think it's good to have like a mixture, like to show that you care about them, and yeah, but that there's a belonging in the family, which is why why it's important to meet other families that also have diversity, so that they can see, oh, we're not the only family that's like this, there's other families too. But yeah.
All right, thanks.